Andy Purewal for ID Boxing. We are here and we are finally joined by promoter Eddie Hearn.
Finally. Andy, I came up to you earlier. I don't mind being honest to the viewers, right? I came up to you earlier. I said, listen, you know I've done about 12 hours of media this week, right? I've no problem doing another interview with you. I keep getting told by people, will you stop? Conor Benn's got a legal case. Will you stop talking? You keep saying, I can't talk about it, but then talk about it for an hour. So I came up to you earlier today and I said, just to let you know, like, I don't mind answering questions, but I can't really talk about that in depth. And you looked at me like in disgust. I'm like, I'm giving you all my time, Andy. And when I come over there, I just gently said to you, sorry, mate, got to go. And you all looked at me like I was a piece of shit. I mean, do you think I want to stand here and do another 2 hours with all these YouTubers to help your channels, right?
We're helping your show.
I disagree, because you don't want to
We're not
talk about
helping
the show.
Right, we did a 10-minute interview yesterday. 6.5 of that was on the show.
You did, but the others didn't. But anyway, crack on.
Right, we'll do.
You're very arrogant, Andrew.
Oh, I disagree with that, Eddie. But yeah, we're here. Taylor-Carabajal weighing. What do you make on both on the scales?
I said to Katie Taylor, I think she looks in the best shape she's ever looked in, honestly. And she seems to be getting, in better condition every fight. Last time against Serrano, you could see, and I just presumed that it was because it was Serrano. But, I thought she looked in tremendous shape. So did Carabajal. I think it's going to be a tough fight. I expect Katie to put a great performance together. Fingers crossed we get this mandatory boxed off and then move on to Croke Park. And I think that's a real possibility.
We spoke about the possibilities of Croke Park yesterday, Eddie. If that's a successful event, what's going to be the plan with kind of Irish boxing on your perspective moving forward? Do you want to try and invest more into it, get back over there more often?
I think, to be honest, that's a one-off event that will only happen once with Katie Taylor. There's no Irish fighters that could get close to filling that stadium. There's probably no fighters that could get close to filling that stadium worldwide, and she deserves it. She's the one that should get that night, and we'll do everything we can to make that happen.
When you consider the journey you've been on with Katie Taylor, Eddie, how much further does it have to go?
It doesn't have to go. I mean, if it stopped now, it would be one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me in my life. It's very, you can see now, everybody's on the bandwagon of women's boxing, right? You have to understand, Andrew, that 6 years ago she debuted in there. We actually got laughed out of town by people, right? You're putting a women's fight on the card. It was headlining. You're headlining with a women's fight. I said, just watch her. I think she's unbelievable. Older promoters, my dad included. Women's boxing, women's like that. No one's going to watch that. No one's going to watch that. Now they're all doing it. Whether it's Frank Warren, whether it's Bob Arum, all of a sudden it's great. But we've been hustling for the last 6 or 7 years to get it in this position. We've done so many women's fights, but also Katie Taylor's been hustling for 30 years nearly to get it in this position. She deserves so much credit. And being the greatest is not just about winning in the ring. It's about all the things that comes with it. It's about being an ambassador, a role model. It's about walking paths that others couldn't walk, and now they can. And she's done all of that. She's the greatest female fighter of all time. She's the greatest ambassador of all time. And she's a legend. And she's such a wonderful individual. She really, like I said, we've had a lot of shit lately. And I have a conversation with her and I see her up there and I see her perform and I think, this is why I love the sport.
Scotney, Mary Romero, another example of a great female fight. Another step up for Ellie. Talk about the fight.
Yeah, I think that... that's a fight that I think Ellie's been match made perfectly so far. In terms of Gianni, in terms of Roman, and now Romero. The winner of this fight will be a mandatory for the IBF title. She's ready if she wins this fight. Very tough fight. Like, Romero is really strong. She's super fit. She's quite dirty in there as well with the head and elbows, unintentionally. But Ellie's just got to be careful because she loves to fight as well. I think it'll be a really good fight, as will Jordan Gill against Kiko Martinez, the other European title fight on the bill. I think that is a tremendous fight. I think it's going to be fight of the night, but such a great 50-50. I love Jordan Gill. He's had so much go wrong for him. And this is his moment now to go out and make the most of what happened in the Gurphy fight and move on and hopefully fight for a world title.
Johnny Fisher, Eddie, I asked him yesterday, I'm going to ask you too, how difficult is he to match simply because at the beginning of his career he was kind of getting through his opponents relatively easily, and then he has that one fight back in February on the Ryder Jacobs card which didn't quite go to plan, and then he comes back and then stops his opponent in Sheffield. Is it easy to find a balance with him?
I think the general strategy for a promoter with someone that sells 2,000 tickets every time he fights is to not put him in dangerous fights. But at the same time, you have to develop a fighter at the right speed because you don't want to just waste their development and not give them a chance to improve. I think we've done it right so far. The last opponent came to win, as is this opponent, and it's the heavyweight division. And also, when you're Johnny Fisher and you walk out to that kind of crowd, automatically you have the potential to make mistakes. And that's what he's had to deal with, and that's sometimes a bigger challenge than the opponents. But it's a good step up for him on Saturday. It's a dangerous fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing his improvements.
Gary Cully as well, Eddie, I spoke to him yesterday and spoke to him about kind of his plans to try and dominate that world team, get on board with it. A potential Maxi Hughes fight down the line, provided Saturday goes.
Yeah, good fight. So many big fights. I mean, Angel Ferreiro, who just boxed on our Mexico show, he's WBO number 3. That's a great fight for Gary Cully. You know, Jorge Linares could land on the Croke Park card or something like that. I don't know, but you know, I think he's ready if he gets through Saturday. A tough fight, another undefeated fighter, and if he gets through, he's on the verge of big fights in the division.
Of course, Eddie, onto that one topic which has continued to kind of rule the headlines over these past few weeks, Conor Benn. We saw his statements yesterday in his articles with the Sun and the Times. I was trying to get your thoughts on what he had to say first.
I think it's just the very start of him coming out with various interviews and pieces of information. I mean, look, I think everybody, you know, in hindsight, could have done things differently around this case. I just want people to know that we're not the regulatory body. You know, when there's a bad result in a ring, automatically I get the blame. You know, we don't appoint the judges. There is a governing body. There is the British Boxing Board of Control. They had every piece of info from every different test. Now, to back the British Boxing Board of Control, because of the nature of the test and because of the results, and again, this will all come out, it was a very difficult decision for them because ultimately, and whether they agree with it or not, the results were not proven to be performance enhancing. I've already talked too much, well, I thought I should again, but I feel very passionately about this because it was a very difficult process to go through. And I don't want to palm it off onto them, but we can't terminate a contract. You know, the opponent can, and the British Boxing Board of Control cannot sanction it. All the information was given into the hands of them, and they went through the process they felt was correct, given the information. And you know, again, I believe they made the right decision. It's probably just a bit unfortunate for us the way it played out, and also financially, that it did take till 2 days or 3 days before the fight, where I think it made the situation look worse. But again, back in the board, it was a difficult situation because of the science that was presented to them.
Eddie, it came out that the first test was done July 25th. Results came back around late August. Did Junior's team know about that test?
Yeah, they know about all tests. The board, ultimately, when they first reported, that test was outside of the contractual agreement with Chris Eubank. The VADA testing that was implemented was outside of that, but the board was still on it. So this was all conveyed to the parties. This went on for a long time, Andy, leading up, weeks before the fight. Don't forget, those results came in around the same time that the second test was taken. And because of the analysis from the test, there was a lot of uncertainty about a number of things around that test. And the board were given the information, and ultimately they didn't suspend him, they wouldn't accept a hearing, and they progressed with the fight at that stage. Eventually, they didn't. And I think they made the right decision. But at that moment, you know, it's a very difficult moment when you're going back, you're talking to Team Eubank. Obviously, they've looked at the medical analysis. They want to proceed with the fight. The board then have to make the decision. And they made, in my opinion, the right decision. But I feel like, at the same time, you know, the response on, oh, Eddie Hearn, you should have cancelled the fight, when contractually and legally we can't. I understand people's comments around that. And
you ask why that is, obviously, as a promoter of a man who's fronting the fight, why do you not have the power to be able to do so?
Contractually, I don't. If a fighter fails the test under the programme, the opponent will have the opportunity to terminate the agreement, and the board will have the opportunity to not sanction the fight. So in that instance, and always in that instance, Andy, and again, not to palm it off, you let the governing body, the regulatory authority, make the decision. They had the information, and again, I think they made the right decision. And it's difficult to put the blame on them because it was a very difficult process, especially given the information and the science and the research that come out. And again, I've said too much again. I came here today, obviously I want to talk about the fight, and I have to let Conor Benn go through his legal process. I'm not Conor Benn's press officer. I'm not his manager. I promote his fights. So anything in relation to Conor Benn and Conor Benn's test, you're going to have to speak to him and let his legal process go out. In terms of the process that we went through, I never have any problem talking about it. But it was a difficult process, but ultimately you let the regulatory authority handle it.
When that first test came back, Eddie, why was maybe the fight not looked at more closely in terms of pulling it? I know you've just spoken about the board. So what changed in the board's eyes to then pull it in the second week? Was it pressure from the media, pressure from the fans?
I don't know. You'll have to ask the board. But we give it to the board. You know, at no point in this, I want to make one thing clear, at no point in this was it kept from the board. And, you know, it was like the board make the decision. And they had a difficult decision because of the, again, like I can't say too much, but because of the results, the board had a difficult position. And again, I can't speak on behalf of the board. If you want to ask them why they let the fight go on for weeks and weeks and weeks, probably because they were getting information. They had a difficult decision. They don't acknowledge VADA. The tests were proven to be, the amounts were proven to be non-performance related. So we said we were going to do one question on this. We've done about 8, but that's your look.
Final one on it all though, Eddie. Conor opting to give up his licence. Some people have suggested that he's going to look just not to box in the UK now. Do you expect that to be the case? He's going to move away?
Look, again, I don't want to start like Tyson Fury had a very similar situation where he decided not to. I don't know whether he reneged it or whether he didn't renew it. He's not licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control. Now he can fight in the UK. So it doesn't mean you can never fight in the UK. The main reason that Conor Benn, by the way, he didn't renege his licence, he didn't renew it, it had expired. The main reason he did that is because he was charged with misconduct, not in relation to a doping offence or a ban, something that he felt was not fair, for a lot of money, and he just felt like there is absolutely no chance with the pressure of the public and the media that he was going to get a fair trial in relation to his doping ban. So he's taken it to a higher level. Will he box in the UK again? I would love him to box in the UK. And I want to make one other thing clear as well. There is absolutely no way. Like he could go and fight in many different jurisdictions right now. There is absolutely no way he would or we would be involved with him not going through a legal or hearing process to play that out before he fights again. So I would love him to return to fight for the UK. And when he clears his name, yes, he can do that. But at the moment, if he didn't have a British Boxing Board of Control licence, it would be at their discretion whether they allowed him to fight in the jurisdiction. If not, he would have to fight in America or the Middle East or wherever it could be. But first things first, until he even thinks about getting back in the ring, more investigation, more hearings, more information, and an opportunity for him to clear his name.
Moving on, Eddie, because as you said, I know there's not much you want to talk about yet. Just want to get your thoughts on the WBA.
There's not much I want to talk about. I mean, I've just spoke on for 10 minutes on it.
I don't know how long it is, but...
Well, you've just asked me 6 questions.
Moving on, Eddie. Yeah, that's fair enough. No, that's fair enough. I understand, but obviously there was more which I had planned to, but I know you can't.
12 interviews to do, so,
That's fair enough, Eddie. Just wanted to get your thoughts on Bam Rodriguez, obviously deciding to move down in weight and vacating his title, the decision behind that.
I think, Bam Rodriguez is a light flyweight who jumped up to super flyweight to challenge against Quadras and then defended against Rungvisai, but I wanted to come back down. It's very unusual for a fighter to drop down to become a multi-weight world champion. He can actually drop to 115, then 112. To 108 as well to become world champion. So first things first, WBO World Flyweight Championship, and then I think a unification with Sonny Edwards, Julio Cesar Martinez, and he wants to become undisputed at flyweight.
Going to squeeze one more. Paco Valcacer has kind of said what the order will be in terms of mandatory positions. So they've got Daniel Dubois as number 1 with WBA, IBF, Filip Hrgović second, and then Joe Joyce at third. Just want to get your thoughts on him saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they, when Joe Joyce fought Parker, they said this would be him next for the title, but it's going to be, unless he gets a voluntary defence, which won't happen, it's going to be a year or so for Joe Joyce to get his chance. But look, you never know what's going to happen. Someone could get injured, but it looks like WBA in the rotation, which obviously we were a part of, WBA, IBF, WBO is right.
Eddie, thank you.
Cheers, mate.